morning, men. All right, so let's do a couple shout outs here. We've got a couple new groups to welcome this morning. There is a men's group of Marines that's meeting on the base at, is it Havelock? Anybody been there? Okay, it's we're going to call it Havelock, North Carolina. And a chaplain approved this group to meet on the base there. Jeremy Mallory is the leader group. And then a second group called Iron Man. You might want to think about your grammar here. Since there are 6 of you, you might want to call it Iron Man. Just saying. Iron Man is the name of the group. 6 guys meeting at 6:30 in the morning. They're from California. University Christian Church, West Los Angeles, California. Scott Julian is the leader there. We're so glad to have you men with us. Would you join me in welcoming these men to the Bible study? 1, 2, 3, hoorah! Good to have you guys with us. Okay. All right. So this morning we're starting a new series, How God Makes Men. We're going to look at the lives of 10 Bible men. We're going to look at 10 epic stories, 10 proven principles, and 1 huge promise for your life. That huge promise is that you can become and you will become the man that God created you to be, because God has a plan to make you into that man, and we're going to explore that. We're going to unpack that. So the first talk in this series is on the life of Abraham, and we're going to look at the principle of believing God anyway. And so, I don't know what kind of impossible circumstances you're in this morning, what kind of seemingly impossible circumstances that you might find yourself in, but we're going to be looking at the life of Abraham, and we're going to see that he faced 3 sets of seemingly impossible circumstances, like there was no way out, like made no sense whatsoever. And God associated 3 different tests to Abraham in these circumstances. And so in Hebrews chapter 11, where you should be, and if you're not, please go there, verse 6 says that without faith, it is impossible to please God. Faith is the foundation of the Christian life. And so Abraham is called the father of our faith. In Genesis 15:6, it says that Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. R.C. Sproul believes, it's his opinion, that's the second most important verse in the Bible, because that is the foundation of the Christian faith, that we are saved by believing. Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. And so we call him the father of our faith. We're going to look at his life. And we're going to see how God made Abraham and then how God makes us. Here's the big idea for the day. You might want to go ahead and start writing it down. It's a little long. It might take you a while. God makes men by showing us how we can believe him anyway in the face of what seemed like impossible circumstances. So the series is How God Makes Men. And so the first principle here, the first way that God makes men is by showing us how we can believe him anyway, even in the face of what seemed like impossible circumstances. And so we're going to look at 3 of those impossible circumstances. And, oh gosh, I'm going to have to stop the talk for a couple minutes to give you a chance to write all that down, I guess. All right, well, you can pick it up later. Here we go. So first up is the first test. So Abraham, he first shows up when he's in the Bible when he's 75 years old. Now, he lived to be 175. I figured out this morning, so he's probably about in our age, like about 40, when he comes on the scene relative to our ages. And so he comes on the scene when he's 75 years old, and he's basically, we find him living down in a place called Ur. It'd probably be like Scottsdale today. He's 75 years old. He's very affluent. And so it's kind of like one of the 10 top cities to retire, back in the day. And so he's got a very comfortable life going on. And in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 through 3, God calls him to leave his country and go to the place I will show you, and I will bless you, and I will make you into a great nation. And if you bless somebody, I'll bless them. And so there's this great promise for this unseen future. And so Abram has a test. Does he leave the comfort of Scottsdale and all of his affluence and go to this place that God hasn't even told him where he's going to go? He just said, go to the place that I will show you. And so that's the first test that we see in Abraham. Will you believe God's great promise for an invisible future, or will you cling to the visible present? That's his test. So how did he do? Let's look at Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8. The text says, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign land, and so forth. So, how did he do? Well, he passed the test. By faith, he went and he obeyed God, and then his life really began to change. Now, it's not that crazy, and it's not that ancient for God to test you like this. To test you, to make you by giving you a test to answer a call to some unknown, invisible future. And every man in this room has had that happen. Every single one of us have had this happen. And so the question is, what will you do? Will you answer the call? Will you pass the test? Will you take this big step that God is asking you to make? Will you believe God? Will you trust in the invisible future, or will you cling to the present that you can see? And so this takes many forms. So it might be, do I change careers? I had to make that decision myself. God called me. God called me to be a real estate developer. I loved real estate development. It made me feel alive. It was my spiritual calling to develop real estate. And so I loved it. And then God organized a test for me and put it to me, would I change my career? Would I leave the thing that I loved, the thing that made me feel alive, and pursue a new career? And so he put out a test in front of me. Here's the problem. I had no idea what I would be doing if I left real estate and went into ministry. In fact, for the first 5 years in ministry, I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I was afraid to say no to anybody because God called me to ministry, but he didn't call me to a specific ministry. And so I did a racial reconciliation ministry in Mississippi. They're still doing it. I'm not. And then he called me to do family ministry. And then he called me to do marriage ministry. And then he called me, or I'm saying use the word call. I got called by people to do these things, to do men's conferences and speak at the Cove, the Billy Graham Training Center, the Cove, and basically I said yes to everything because I was afraid that if I said no to something, I might miss God's way. And man, it was 5 full years before God made it clear that my calling was men's discipleship. But I passed the test because I I just kept moving forward by faith. That's what he wants you to do. Just keep moving forward in faith. Keep going even though you're not knowing. So maybe it's about who you're supposed to marry. Or maybe it's about whether or not you, maybe it's about whether or not you're going to adopt a foreign child. You're going to go through some kind of adoption process. Or maybe it's to get some additional education, or to go and be reschooled for a new career. I remember myself in 10 years ago, I was praying one day, and I was saying, Father, I said, Lord, I can look at my ministry now because I got a couple decades of background here. I can look at my ministry, and arithmetically, I can kind of project out what kind of impact, you're going to get, what kind of return on, you made an investment in me, and you want a return on the investment, and I can kind of arithmetically, chart that out and see what's going to happen, over the next, for the rest of my career. And so, and I made this prayer. I said, Father, is there something that you would like me to do differently that might give you a greater return on the investment that you've made in me? You know what the answer was? I would like you to go get a PhD in management. I said, what? And I was thinking, this makes absolutely no sense. Absolutely no sense. But by faith, I did it. I obeyed. I was already 1/3 of the way through a Doctor of Ministry program out at RTS. I do have a master's in theology. So I was a third of the way through a doctoral. And so, I mean, it's not like there was no context for this whatsoever. But I went ahead and I did that. And I finished that, like six years ago, I finished that program. And just now, it's beginning to become, 10 years later, and it's just now coming into focus why he wanted me to do that. Because we're trying to go from a staff of 15 people to a staff of 350 people. And trust me, you need to have some management skills to do that. Skills I didn't have. Things I hadn't been exposed to. I would have had to do this research anyway. But hey, now I got a PhD. Pretty cool. So, whatever it is that God is calling you to, the question for you is, whatever that thing that he's prompting you to do, leading you to do, will you answer that call to go, even though you don't know? Will you believe in the reality of the unseen, what you can't see, or will you cling to the unreality of what you do see? Because what you see is not necessarily the real thing. Not necessarily. The real thing. And we get this by faith. That's how Abraham, the operative principle here, was by faith. He believed God. He believed God, and that's the big idea today. God makes men by showing us how we can believe him anyway in the face of what seemed like impossible. In the face of what seems like it's just impossible. It's not. It's not. This is one of the main ways that God makes men, is he shows us how to live by faith. This is showing us how to live by faith. He tests us. It's not an ancient idea. It's the normal Christian life. This is the normal Christian life. God will test us because he loves us and he's trying to make us into the men that he wants us to be. Second test. So, at Abraham's 10-year mark, roughly his 10-year mark, God comes to him and says, I'm your mighty shield and so forth. And Abraham says, well, here we are. And, how can this promise that you made to me, a decade ago, how can that be true? I don't even have a son. I'm supposed to be this great nation. I don't even have an heir. And God reaffirmed his promise to him. Oh, but then poor Abraham. He was a flawed man, just like you and I are flawed men. So instead of completely trusting and waiting on God to do the thing that God had promised, he accepted his wife's offer to sleep with Hagar at the 10-year mark and have Ishmael. And God said, no. It's not through Ishmael that this promise is going to be fulfilled. And he ended up at 99 years of age, 24 years after the promise was made, Abraham still has no heir. Still has no heir. And his wife at that point is beyond the childbearing years, and Abraham's not exactly a spring chicken anymore at 99. And so the test that God put to him is, will you believe God for the impossible? Will you believe God for the impossible? Will you trust him to do what seems impossible? How did he do? Look at Hebrews chapter 11, verse 11. By faith, Abraham, even though he was past the age and Sarah herself was barren, wasn't able to become a father because he considered him, God, faithful, who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous. I'm going to have a baby. Him as good as dead. So he believed God by faith. By faith. That's how he did it. The application for you. You know, most men can point to something that they just are absolutely sure that God called them to do. And now it's 5, 10, 15 or more years later, and it still hasn't happened. Every single man in this room knows what I'm talking about. And it's a grief that you carry around. It's a pain that you carry around. It's a burden that you carry around. And now it's been so long, you're thinking, you know, God, I thought I had heard from you, but I guess I was wrong. Man, don't do that. Don't do that. Because, and I've taught it here before, and I'm going to teach you right now, because you need to think in Bible time. We think in temporal time. But God thinks in Bible time. It should be pretty obvious by this passage that God thinks different in an altogether different way about time than we do. So the scriptures say, with the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. So in one sense, Jesus died 2,000 years ago, but in another sense, it was the day before yesterday, in Bible time. In Bible time. And so the 500 years, God already told Abraham his people are going to be enslaved. And so he's already set out a 500-year timeline for this promise of Abraham to occupy the promised land. God has already set out it's going to be a 500-year process. And so, but if a day is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years is like a day, I'm going to make my promise to you come true by noon. You know, you're going to have to wait till noon. Because with the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years and 1,000. And so if God wants to give you a 10-year wait, not a 25-year wait, just a 10-year wait, would you be willing to wait 10 minutes for God to give you the thing that you want most in life? Would you be willing to wait 10 minutes? That's all he's asking. Actually, it's not all he's asking. It's a test. It's a test. Will you believe him for 10 minutes? Or 20 minutes? So, you know, I've got a brother, Bill. I've asked you guys to pray for him many times. And so I have been praying for Bill for 4 decades to come to Christ. And I remember so well the 19th year. I prayed the whole 19th year. I prayed that he would. But I realized at the end of the 19th year that I'd stopped believing that God could save him. So I really wasn't praying in faith. I was just wrote words. And then I repented of that and started thinking that back to the idea that, you know, God can do, I can trust God to do that which seems impossible, and that's your test too. The thing that you want so much that you feel like he's called you to do, led you to do a long time ago. Or maybe not so long ago, but probably a long time ago. Will you trust God to do this impossible thing? That's the test. Now, some of you have children. Some of you are old enough to have children who have strayed from the faith. And there is no pain like child pain. You know, if your kids are doing well, all of your other problems will fit into a thimble. But if your kids are not doing well, you know, men compartmentalize, you know, and women, you know, everything kind of, and so, but men compartmentalize. But if you have a child who's gone astray, if you have a child, you're too. You become a woman. If you have a child who's not walking with God, you become a woman. And so, you know, if you have that kind of pain, yeah, and you get to a point where you just don't know if you can hang on anymore. You just can't pass this. Yes, you can. Yes, you can, because God has shown us how He wants to make you into the godly father that will not give up on that child. You and your spouse, you probably are the only ones in the whole world who would be willing to actually pray and implore God to do something on a daily basis. You're probably the only ones in the whole world. If you give up, you got to keep the faith, you see. So the question is, will you do that? Will you give it a few more years? Will you give God a chance to bring Himself the glory? Yes, you will, because you understand that God makes men by showing us how we can believe Him anyway, even in the face of what seem like impossible situations, impossible circumstances. And then the third test, making the ultimate sacrifice. Making the ultimate sacrifice. So keep your finger in Hebrews. This is just, I was disturbed and distraught and sad yesterday just on doing this particular test. I just want you to, because it's the Word of God, I want you to see it with your own eyes. Keep your finger in Hebrews and turn to Genesis chapter 22. Genesis chapter 22. And the other thing I want to do by having you turn to Genesis 22 is note that this is the area of the Bible where the Abraham story is told. It begins at the end of Genesis 11 and runs out here through Genesis 23. And so if you wanted to read this story, it would take a few minutes, a half hour, maybe something like that. It took me an hour to really read it carefully yesterday. And this, so here is where it is. But let's take a look at Genesis 22, verse 2. So start at 1. Look at 1. It says, so sometime later, God tested Abraham. Just so you know, I'm not making this language up, this test language. This is God's language. Sometime later, God tested Abraham for the third time. Actually, it's the third one we're looking at. There are a few more. These three major tests, though. And He said, Abraham. And Abraham replied, here I am. And then God said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. It's another going not knowing kind of a thing. But go and sacrifice your son. So Abraham must be thinking, God, I don't understand this. This makes no sense. This makes absolutely no sense. Now, to us, by the way, this is it's strange and it's bizarre in any world, but more so in our world. And back then, you have to understand that children were routinely sacrificed to other gods, and so this would not have been some totally foreign, crazy idea. It would be like if God said, go and have an abortion. Okay, now I mean that would sound pretty bizarre and crazy and not very like God to you, right? But you would. It's not like nobody ever had an abortion before and you didn't know what it was. Okay, so it's like go and abort your son. I mean that's actually the kind of there's no good analogy, but that's an analogy. That's what's going on here. Just think about how devastating this is. And I'll say, God, I don't understand. Lord, the promise. I mean, all the nights that my wife Sarah wept herself to sleep because she couldn't bear children. The ache that I carried around for all those years because I thought you had abandoned me and we're not going to, give me the promise. But I kept on believing, and now you want me to do what? And so the practice when they would sacrifice an animal is they would slit the throat. And so the image that we probably get when you think about Abraham sacrificing his son, it says he's about to take the knife and sacrifice his son. So we kind of picture him getting ready to plunge a dagger into the chest of his son. No. The son would be laying on the altar of wood where he would be burned, and then he would slit his throat, slit the throat, and the blood would drain out of his own son. And Abraham, I had to draw the line here yesterday. I could not do this. I don't have that much faith. And so Abraham, though, was getting ready to do this. And God said, stop. Now I know that you truly trust me. Now I know. And so the test was never really that God wanted Abraham to sacrifice his son. That was never the test. The test was whether or not Abraham was willing to do it. Was Abraham willing to do it? God was never going to do it. He just wanted to know if Abraham, who Abraham would put first. And so the test, this gruesome test is that Abraham had to. It was this: are you willing to give up the one thing that you most want to keep? That's the greatest test of all. And men, it's the same test that Jesus puts to each one of us. Are you willing to give up the one thing you most want to keep? And for most of it's our own lives. We want to be in control of our lives. We want to be able to call our own shots, make our own decisions, achieve our own goals. And Jesus is saying, but I'm among you as one who serves. If you want to be the greatest, be the least. The greatest among you will be like the least among you. And if any man wants to follow me, he has to deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. If you don't love everyone and everything else less by comparison, you are not worthy to be my disciple. And so the test, though, is not whether or not you're willing to sell your big home or not drive a luxury car, but would you be willing to do that? In other words, will you give those things to God to do with as He wants you to do for His glory? Now, in most cases, God gives you your son back. You give up the thing that you most want to keep, and He lets you keep it anyway. He just wanted to know if you would be willing to truly trust Him by faith. How did Abraham do? Let's look at verse 17. By faith. Oh my gosh. There's that operative principle 3 times. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had received the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son. Even though God had said to him, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead, and figuratively speaking, that's exactly what he did. He did receive Isaac back from the dead. By faith, and then it goes on to the next story about Isaac. So I remember first, just brand new Christian. I didn't know anything about myself, much less God. And I had this business deal, one of my first business deals. And we lost a major tenant. It was an office building. We lost a major tenant. Couldn't find a replacement. Had one investor that had way too much of his capital tied up in that one project, and so he was coming unglued. And he was spreading rumors. He was threatening a lawsuit. And I'm just this young, wet behind the ears businessman. And, I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. I just knew that the newspaper was going to get a hold of this, and then that'd be the end of my career, the end of my real estate career. I mean, that's what I thought. I mean, now I realize, you can have an affair, and 3 years later, you can get reelected to Congress. But anyway, that's... At the time, I didn't know all that, And so I was pleading with God. I said, God, I don't know what to do. Please. It's an impossible set of circumstances. It's just impossible. There's no way out. And then one morning, I was reading Proverbs chapter 3, verses 25 and 26. Have no fear of sudden disaster or of the ruin that overtakes the wicked, for the Lord will be your confidence, and he will keep your foot from being snared. And God spoke to my heart, and peace came flooding in. And I realized, it was one of my very early encounters with the living God, with the living Word, because he spoke to me, and I felt like I'd just been hit with a taser, man. It was a nice taser, and so it changed my life right there on the spot. It changed my life, and it released faith. That's what the Word of God does. That's what God does. He releases faith. That's why he gives us these tests. It's because he wants to make us by showing us that we can believe him, even in the face of what seem like these impossible circumstances. So he gives us his Word, and he quickens his Word to our hearts. But you got to be in the Word to have it quicken, But he changed my life with that verse, and that's what he wants to do with each of us. That's what he wants to do with each of us. And he's given us Abraham as a type. He's given us Abraham as a model, as an example of how God makes men by testing us. And we respond to this test with faith. The big idea here today, God makes men by showing us how we can believe him. Believe him, even in the face of what seem like impossible circumstances. So, the next time God asks you to strike out, to go someplace, or the next time that God asks you to wait longer than seems normal, or the next time God asks you to make a sacrifice to him of something that's precious to you, and you wonder if it's worth the cost, pull an Abraham. Pull an Abraham. Let's pray. Our dearest Father, Lord, this is so relevant to us today. This ancient story with these odd circumstances is so absolutely relevant to us today. So, Father, your word, these stories, these epic stories, these proven principles, this is how you make men. Lord, help each of us to be able to grasp this principle, this big idea of how you're making us by showing us how we can believe you anyway in the face of what seem like impossible circumstances. Tutor to our hearts. Help us to flesh this out in our table discussions. We ask this in your name, Jesus. Amen.